Hello everyone. Today we're going to be doing a huge Q&A for my 20,000 subscriber celebration. I am so excited that this channel hit 20,000 subscribers. I think the channel is already at 21,000 subscribers at the time of filming this because things have been happening way too quickly and I haven't been able to actually sit down and film this video. So there were a ton of questions that were submitted by people. We have categories that are all over the place today. I have pages and pages of notes and questions that we're going to go through. We've got, what are our categories today? We have servitors, sigils, gods, spirits and death, witchcraft and spellwork, and then there's a random category for spirituality, magic, and conspiracy theories. I didn't even know how to classify these questions. So there's just a huge random category that we're going to go through. We're going to talk about the astral realm. We're going to talk about meditation and altered states of consciousness. And then there were a lot of questions about my personal magical practice and my personal life. And then there's a mental health category that I kind of just lumped in anything that had to do with the mindset, dealing with doubt or fears or whatever it is. I just kind of put that all under the mental health category. And then we also have a controversial category as well. So my goodness, there are going to be timestamps on this video. So if there's any particular topic you're interested in, feel free to skip to that if you want to. I was going to read everyone's usernames, except for the people that wanted to be anonymous, of course. But after looking at the usernames, y'all have some weird usernames. No offense. I mean, I love it. I'm all for the weird and the strange, but some of the usernames just had like a string of long numbers, or some had just like random characteristics. I think what happened is when YouTube changed over to adding a handle for everyone, it's not really your YouTube channel name anymore. It's your handle name that I saw commenting. So I'm not even gonna try to read usernames in this video because I would spend over half of the video just trying to even pronounce out some of these usernames, actually a lot of the usernames. But I did try to categorize all the questions so that people could at least try to find their question a little bit easier. And like the gods category, for example, I wanted to categorize all the questions about gods and goddesses in one area because a lot of what I say is going to kind of bleed into other questions, and the questions are just going to guide a whole conversation that we're going to have about gods. So you may find, if you're somebody that submitted a question, that your question is actually answered throughout someone else's question, but I'll still read your question and kind of elaborate on it. So anyways, I have my beverage, I have my snack. This is going to be an all-day filming adventure here. I wanted to say thank you so much for the 20,000 subscribers. I can't even believe that. I can't even wrap my mind around how many people that is. To me, that's like totally insane. So thank you so much for that, and let's go. Let's do it. As promised on my Instagram, if you are on my Instagram, you already know this, but I just recently adopted a rescue dog. And as promised in the comments of that one photo that I posted, I promised that I would show the adopted dog because who doesn't want to see a cute dog? So anyways, I adopted this rescue dog, Sheba. We may potentially change her name because she is only 3 years old, and honestly, she doesn't even respond to her name at all. So we might change her name. I'm not really sure, but she's mainly an Australian Shepherd. She is mixed with some other bigger dog breed. We just aren't really sure what it is. We think it's maybe potentially German Shepherd just with the shape of her face, but she lost a lot of hair due to a skin condition that developed from being in extremely stressful environments. She's the sweetest though. She has the sweetest temperament, and I'm just really happy that she found her forever home. So anyways, this is Sheba, and even though she's looking a little scraggly right now, she's looking very scraggly actually, we're just waiting for her hair to grow back. She's already been treated for the skin condition. Everything's in the clear as far as that goes. And she looks very similar to my other dog. So my other dog, Loki, he is a half Australian Shepherd, half Shiba Inu. So he's a little bit smaller, but now he has a little girlfriend and I'm really happy about that. I will say the cat is super pissed off and not happy that we have 2 dogs now. So that has been a little bit of a struggle. But yes, there's my dog and there is the update. So the first topic that we're going to talk about is servitors. And I think that's actually kind of perfect because if you notice back here, I have a little genie lamp. This is the genie lamp that I got in Greece, and it's a genie lamp that I wanted to use to house a servitor. So I actually have a servitor with me right now. I am introducing them to their brand new environment. So I have a little baby servitor just hanging out in that little genie lamp while I film this video today. But anyways, starting with the first question about servitors. My question is about servitors. Two things have caused me to avoid this subject. I abhor slavery, and as an animist, I believe that everything has a spirit. So that's where I am, but I'm also a lifelong learner, and I trust you to have considered these things in mind and heart. Can you set my mind at ease about this? So for anybody that isn't familiar with servitors, I do have a video, I'll link it in the description box, of what servitors are, how to create them, all of that stuff. It's a magical entity that's created by the magical practitioner, and I completely understand this perspective, and I think a lot of people think about this when you create a servitor. You have this little ethical dilemma in your mind where you don't really want to subject them to slavery and just force all of these servitors to do your bidding. So this is actually something that I have thought a lot about, and here's my conclusion and kind of how I view servitors. So I've expressed before that servitors for me are thought forms. They are an extension of my subconscious mind that end up taking shape or taking form and kind of taking a life of their own. And so how you treat your servitors really is a direct reflection of how you treat yourself. The better that you treat your servitors, the better that you are treating yourself. You can view them as your children if you want to, and it can also be a form of self-care, working with servitors. If you're someone that has a really difficult time, maybe doing self-care for yourself, having something else to take care of that also has some sort of connection to you and your own mind can be really helpful. But I like to use the example of dogs, which is actually really funny because I have one behind me and then one right over here right now. Dogs love a good, strong alpha. They feel safe, they feel secure, they want a strong alpha to be able to give them stability, direction, to be able to give them a job. If you've ever noticed with dogs, they really do enjoy having some sort of a job. I will go outside and hide a bunch of treats all over my backyard and then have my dogs hunt for those treats, and they love it. They love having that brain stimulation. And if you've ever noticed with dogs that don't have a job, sometimes they get bored, they start crying or whining or howling or digging or tearing stuff up. These dogs need stimulation and they need a strong alpha to give them direction. So I kind of view my servitors as a wolf pack. They are the gremlins inside my mind that are chaotic, that are running around, and I am taking those gremlins and I'm giving them a very specific task. And they are designed for this task. They're very good at what they're doing. I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you have this job where you're just really, really good at it. You have the right skills. You are the best at your job. There is no better feeling than being really, really good at something. So my servitors are created with that in mind. They have the skill set to complete the job that no one else has. I have one servitor that's maybe really good at finding things and another servitor that's really good for calming the nervous system. And each one has been built for those tasks and they enjoy it because they're good at it and they're helping the entire system reach a state of equilibrium. So that is kind of how I get around the ethical dilemma of slavery. Is I really think of it as more of a wolf pack, spending a lot of my life around dogs and having some sort of dog pack. You really do learn how to be the alpha in a way that takes care of them. You are compassionate, you are giving treats to them, you're rewarding them for good behavior. You are providing a safe space for them to be in. You are feeding them. You're walking them every day and giving them stimulation and giving them things to do so they don't go slowly insane. So I hope that eases your mind a little bit about servitors. I really do love servitors. I think that they can be immensely helpful for helping the entire system, the system being you, achieve what it is that you desire. So the next question is on sigils, and this is actually a question I get so often. I'm really glad this question was asked and that I could clear this up. But the question is, when using planetary grids to create sigils, a lot of methods have you reduce your statement to the numbers 1 through 9. However, most of the planetary grids have more than 9 squares. Other than borrowing from numerology systems, is there a specific reason why to always reduce to 9 versus only reducing as much as you need to or not for the numbers to appear on the grid? So one thing I love about sigils the most is that you are creating an image that speaks to your own subconscious mind, and so you can do whatever you want with sigils. I think the method of reducing everything down to numbers 1 through 9 was simply for the sake of simplicity. And a lot of people were using the Saturn grid, which only had I think it's 9 squares on the Saturn grid versus the other planetary grids that are much larger. So you don't necessarily have to reduce it down to numbers 1 through 9 if you don't want to. You can keep it, letters 1 through 26, whatever you want for the English language. language. Obviously, every language is going to be a little bit different. Don't get too caught up in the technicalities of sigils because so many different traditions like to make sigils in very, very different ways. So it's really just about simplifying your phrase. That's all it is. However you can simplify your phrase, you do that. And the whole point of simplifying the phrase is so you can actually get a sigil that looks nice and clean and neat. Because if you have an intention phrase, let's say that's 15 words long, and you don't reduce it down, you don't take out vowels, you don't reduce it to numbers, you don't whatever, that is a lot of letters that you are trying to cram into one sigil, and it's going to look horrible. So really, it's just about simplifying it down however you can to get a really nice, clean, simple sigil. All you're doing is taking an intention phrase from your conscious mind, turning it into an image, because that's what speaks to your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind doesn't really talk in words, it talks more in pictures. So that is why you want to take that intention phrase, turn it into a picture, implant it into your subconscious mind, and then let it manifest subconsciously as you go about your day. And on that note, I've actually gotten a lot of questions about, well, why do you take out the vowels? Let's say you have an intention phrase, you're trying to reduce it down to a shorter snippet to turn into a sigil. Why do you take out the vowels and only leave the consonants? And the reason for this is because if you look at a word and then you take out the vowels and then try to read that word again, the sounding consonants still make the sound of the word. The integrity of the word is left. Try it with any word. Take a word, take out the vowels, and then try to sound out that word, and it still sounds like the original word. Now, if you were to do the opposite, if you were to cross out all the consonants and only leave the vowels, it is not going to sound anything like the original word that you were trying to reduce it from. Again, there's no right or wrong way. You don't have to cancel out vowels if you don't want to, but it's just a way to reduce it down and get rid of some of the letters for the sake of simplicity without compromising the integrity of that word, of that intention phrase. So I hope that makes sense. Really, with sigils, you can do whatever it is you want to do because it's your own subconscious mind, and everyone's subconscious mind is a little bit different. Some people don't even do an intention phrase at all. Some people just sit down and they do a free-flowing exercise where they are creating some sort of image on the paper in front of them and drawing as they think about their intention, and whatever comes out comes out. I think I still do reduce down to numbers 1 through 9 just because it's the easiest method for me when using planetary grids. And then I just search for those numbers 1 through 9 on the bigger grid. So let's say I'm using the moon. The moon has a huge planetary grid. I'm reducing my intention phrase down to the numbers 1 through 9. I would just look for those numbers on the moon grid and then still create my sigil out of that. So it's whatever you want to do. So now we are going to move into the section about gods. There are a lot of questions in this category. So I'm just going to say this is all based on my own opinion. Okay, nobody has the right answer to any of this. I just have to put that out there first and foremost, but I will definitely share my opinion. So the first question is, so I want to work with the goddess Lilith. Does it mean that I must stop praying to my other deities, the Hindu gods and goddesses? And also, is it correct if I consider the goddess Lilith the same as the goddess Kali? So my answer to this is you get to make up your own opinion about this because this is a debate between hard polytheism and soft polytheism. Hard polytheism is the belief in multiple gods, of course, with polytheism, but the hard part of hard polytheism is they believe that every god is very distinct and separate from other gods. So the goddess Lilith would not be the same as the goddess Kali. However, soft polytheism has this perspective where you're still believing in multiple gods, but if you see gods from different cultures that have somewhat similar characteristics, you can kind of consider them the same entity. Because you might notice looking into different cultures and the different gods that they potentially worshipped, a lot of the themes and gods are similar in their energy. And so with soft polytheism, this is the idea that yes, you can consider this one god the same as this other god because they share very similar energy. So again, it's up to you to decide whether you are more of a hard polytheist or a soft polytheist. And I would really recommend looking into those two terms a little bit more. There's so many occult YouTubers that have made exceptional videos deep diving into what hard polytheism is versus soft polytheism, so definitely look into that a little bit more. And as far as the first question goes, does it mean that I have to stop praying to my other deities or Hindu gods and goddesses? That is purely up for you to decide. My opinion is no, absolutely not. You do not have to stop working with other gods just because you're working with another god. Some people say that you can only work with one god at a time. Some people say that you cannot mix pantheons. I would like to recommend Dr. Angela Puka has a fantastic YouTube channel. She is an academic. She is much more knowledgeable than I am when it comes to the history of the occult. I am not a historian and an academic. I'm a practitioner. I am deep in the trenches, okay? So I would like to recommend her channel because the knowledge there is just amazing. But she had mentioned on one of her videos that this idea of cross pantheon worship is actually a lot older than a lot of people think it is. People have been doing this for centuries. People have been mixing pantheons forever. So yes, I do believe that you can worship one god from one pantheon and another god from another pantheon. If you are personally experiencing issues though, let's say in the mythology, if you're worshiping one god that hates another god, and then you try to put both of them on the same altar, you know, maybe fill that out for yourself and figure out if that feels good to you, because according to the mythology, if you go into that, if these two gods don't like each other, putting them on the same altar together and worshiping them equally, you know, you may not have the best results with that. But again, it's up for you to experiment and explore and find out for yourself. The next question is, as someone who works with the psychology and the occult, what is your opinion on a psychology of belief when it comes to working with a deity? I have lived with my partner for 10 years and some of his atheism has rubbed off on me, it seems. I'm working with Hecate right now, but having trouble actually believing that she's real. This question seemed to come up in various forms, I should say. Can I just start by saying, oof, that's rough, because I was an atheist for a really long time and I can completely resonate with that. So I started working with deities as purely psychological archetypes, and I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that. Even if you don't believe that she's real and you're just working with her as a psychological archetype, it gives you access to a certain part of your subconscious mind that you might not be able to access otherwise. So it's an incredible tool, and even if you can't get past that point, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's still a powerful thing to be doing. I still struggle at times when I'm working with deities, I still struggle to figure out whether they are real or whether it's a figment of my imagination or whatever. But really at the end of the day, whether gods are real or not, they are creating real change in our life. And I think that's the most important part to remember too. My dog is drinking water out of the bowl over there, so I'm really sorry if you can hear that. But I wanted to bring up an example of different dimensions, different thought dimensions, because there was this video that I watched as a kid, and I think a lot of people watched the same video because I was in class and I was forced to watch it, and I think a lot of us did. Honestly, I don't even remember where this video came from, but it was this video of these people playing basketball, and you had one team that was one color and another team that was another color. So for the sake of things, let's say that one team had on black shirts and then one team had on white shirts or whatever, because I'm pretty sure that's how it went and that's what's going to make sense with what I'm trying to explain. But we were all encouraged to watch the team wearing white t-shirts. And so you would watch this whole video watching the white t-shirt team play basketball, right? And you noticed absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. It was just a normal team playing basketball, whatever. And then you were told after watching the video that this gorilla had actually got up and walked across the screen. And for a minute you sit there going, no, there's no way a gorilla walked up across the screen. I was watching the team wearing white t-shirts this entire time playing basketball. I didn't see any gorilla get up and walk in front of the screen. What are you even talking about? And then you were asked to focus on the team wearing black t-shirts. And so you would watch this video play back again, the exact same video, but you were focusing on the team wearing the black t-shirts. And then all of a sudden you see this man dressed in a giant gorilla costume. It was like this giant black gorilla costume, and he slowly is walking across the screen, which is hilarious because you didn't notice it when you were looking at the white t-shirts, but then when you were looking at the black t-shirts, you were able to see this giant black gorilla costume walking across the screen. Brain filters are crazy. It's so crazy and so interesting. You can literally filter out things that you're not looking for. So for an atheist, there really is no God. There is no God because it does not affect them. It has zero effect on their life. It's not something that they're looking for. It's not something that exists in their dimension of reality. An atheist is similar to the person watching the basketball team with white t-shirts play basketball. There was no gorilla, and it didn't have any sort of effect on it because the gorilla didn't interact with the people that were wearing the white t-shirts. It had zero effect on their play on the game that they were playing. However, if you're that person that does believe in deities and that is something that you're looking for and you're focusing more on the black t-shirts, you are going to see that gorilla walking across the screen, and it is very real for you and it does affect your reality. So I think that different thought dimensions can exist. I think that atheists can be right. I think that polytheists can be right. And I think monotheists can be right. I think everybody can be right because we are all creating our own realities that we're experiencing. So if that eases your mind a little bit, I just wanted to say that your atheist partner may not be able to see some of the things that you're seeing, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's invalidating your experience. It just means that you two have very different brain filters on right now. Also, I want to add to that, as a former atheist, which now in the next question, I think I'll get a little bit more into what it is that I identify with now. There is a point when you're working with deities where some stuff happens that it just feels like, how could this not be real? You know, like you start to question. I've had so many conversations with people that are like, oh, I started out as an atheist and I started working with deities as psychological archetypes, and then weird stuff started happening and I couldn't really explain it as a psychological archetype anymore. And then you start maybe believing that there's something else out there, but you're not really sure how to identify it or put a label on it or whatever. I'm sure you've probably experienced some things that were a little bit unexplainable, and we also don't have to have a label. We don't have to know what it is that we truly believe when it comes to deities, because this concept is so abstract, and I think it's actually better to just not know and go in without any sort of bias, or try to be as unbiased as possible and just experiment and see what happens with that deity. So again, whether you believe deities are external entities or psychological archetypes or whatever, if they are creating real change in your life, they are absolutely real, even as psychological archetypes. So the next question is, I would like to know how you view deities and gods. Are they beings kind of like us, just energy, conscious beings, etc.? I truly believe that they are what you believe them to be, because as a chaos magician, I am very much about your belief is a tool to manifest what you want. If you believe in something, it is real because your belief is making it real. So if you believe that it's just energy, it's just energy. If you believe it's some sort of conscious external energy, then that's exactly what it is, because that's how that energy is interacting with you and affecting your life. For me, I go back and forth on this all the time. All the time. I have moments where I'm more of an atheist. I have moments where I'm more of a pantheist. Sometimes where I could see myself maybe as a soft polytheist, not fully, but maybe. But I will say that deities feel very different than spirits. We've got a whole category of spirits coming up that we're going to talk about, and deities feel almost like a softer, more subtle energy than spirits do to me. And I'm going to go into my experiences and why I believe that later when we get to the spirit section. I don't necessarily think it's conscious energy. I think it's more subconscious or unconscious energy. And I also feel like we're going to talk about this more when we get to death. I think I'm just gonna, this is all the questions kind of roll into each other. I think they can be whatever we believe them to be, and my view on deities changes all the time. So I don't even know if I could give a direct answer to this at this point of time. Let me just say that they could be anything that you want them to be, and however they show up to you, it is valid. The next question is, I struggle with reconciling my skepticism when believing in a goddess or god. As a skeptic, do you have these same struggles, and how do you bring it together? I think I kind of touched on this when answering the previous question, so my answer to this will be pretty short. Be skeptical. I think it's actually really good and really healthy to be skeptical. But when you're struggling to reconcile your skepticism, and then that's all you're doing is being skeptical and not remaining open-minded to the possibility of, you know, entities actually existing beyond psychological archetypes, that can sometimes be detrimental. It can be really limiting, at least. For me, I really try to view myself as a mad scientist. That's an archetype that I work with a lot. And as a more scientifically geared person, A true scientist is going to remain open-minded to the possibility that they are wrong. Something that really bothers me about the scientific community is that we're supposed to be experimentalists, right? We're supposed to be experimenting and seeing what's out there. But I find that a lot of scientifically minded people are close-minded, which to me is so the opposite of what a scientist should be, because we thought the earth was flat for the longest time before we realized that the earth was round. Scientists should be the first people to say, I was wrong, or let's explore this more. Let's come into this with a brand new open mind to see if we can learn something more. And I'm saying scientists because it kind of relates to that skepticism, and I am very much guilty of this as well. But when I think about it that way, when I try to reframe my mind and think of myself as a mad scientist who's just wanting to experiment and try to be as unbiased as possible, I think that's what really helps me get over this level of skepticism. So if you believe deities are only psychological archetypes right now, totally fine. Continue working with them if you want to and see what happens. You may reach a point where you're working with a deity, and this has happened to me, where something crazy happens and you just think to yourself, there is no way that this is just a psychological archetype. I think I'm working with something more right now. And it doesn't have to be more as in polytheism or monotheism or whatever. It can just be something that's unlabeled for now, but remaining open-minded. As an open-minded scientist, that's really what I strive to be. So that's kind of how I handle my skepticism, is stepping into that mad scientist archetype and just reminding myself that we don't have all the answers and we're never going to have all the answers because humans have tiny little pea brains and we're not meant to know the answer. So until then, we get to guess, we get to experiment, we get to play, and why not just play? So the next question is, how do you incorporate working with the archetype a deity represents without actually worshiping or calling on that deity? I do not feel comfortable calling on deities, but I do want to gain attributes of some, and so I figure I can be learning about them, setting up my altar accordingly, meditating on them, but I am afraid this could be the same as worshiping them or communing with them, and I don't want to do that. Where is the line where you are just getting involved with the archetype and taking on qualities versus worshiping to and talking to them? For me, there is no line. If you are creating an altar for them, if you are meditating on them, if you are, doing all these things, you're going to attract that energy into your life. So if you believe that deities actually exist, yes, you are going to be attracting that deity. But some people, again, like our conversation with some of these other questions, some people don't even believe that deities exist and they only work with deities as psychological archetypes. So you're gonna have to evaluate how you personally perceive deities. Do you see them as more psychological archetypes, or do you actually see them as external entities? And if you do view them as external entities, then yes, what you are doing is absolutely considered worship, and you will be attracting them into your life. So what I would suggest then, if you are someone that does not view deities as psychological archetypes, and you actually do believe that they are external entities, but you're still wanting to work with that archetypal energy, create a servitor. Servitors are fantastic. You can create a servitor that has very similar characteristics and then work with that servitor to embody all those characteristics within you. So as I mentioned earlier in the servitor category, I will link that video in the description box below if you want to learn more about servitors, but I would recommend going that route and working with a servitor that you have created for yourself rather than continuing to kind of worship a deity but not really wanting to worship a deity, because it's unavoidable. You're gonna attract them into your life if you are setting up an altar and doing things like that. So I hope that makes sense. I hope it's helpful. The next question is, so I trust very few people in here, but you are one of them. Thank you. That's really sweet. I'm glad you trust me. This is a question I get a lot. Cross-pantheon worship, is it okay or not okay? So this kind of goes along with everything that I was saying previously. Cross-pantheon worship is something that has been happening for way longer than most people think it is. Like I did that little plug in the beginning of this section about Dr. Angela Puka, checking out her channel and getting a more academical, side of things as far as this conversation goes. But even just thinking about Hermes Trismegistus, I talk about him all the time because I'm obsessed. He is the combination of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. There are so many different cultures that have blended together to create two gods, that have combined one god from one area, another god from another area, and combine them together to create something else. So cross-pantheon worship to me is absolutely okay. The only caveat I will add to that is, as I mentioned earlier, if you're worshiping two gods that absolutely hate each other and you're putting them on the same altar, that may potentially be a recipe for a disaster. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. So looking into the mythology, you know, might be a little important there, but otherwise I think cross-pantheon worship is totally okay. The next question is, what do you think about working with reconstructed deities from pre-writing eras? Also, what do you think about making planetary magic to work with pantheons which haven't associated their gods with the planets? My answer is super short to this one because I'm a chaos magician. We do whatever the hell we want. So I think that's absolutely okay as long as it gets you results, because that is the whole point of chaos magic, is that you are allowed to experiment and play and find the most efficient, effective way of doing magic. So if it works for you, it works. And I find that a lot of stuff that we're working with is reconstructed anyway. So when we're talking about the reconstructed deities from pre-writing eras, I mean, let's even talk about ancient Egypt. That is a source of fascination for so many different people. We still don't fully know how ancient Egyptians used to do their magical practice. We definitely don't know how the Druids used to do it. There's so much in the pagan communities that is reconstructed. I don't think there's anything wrong with reconstructed practices. And I really do believe in egregores, which are these entities that are created by the collective, by many people believing in these entities. It gives them life, it gives them shape. And so let's say a god was created out of a, you know, they're reconstructing some sort of magical practice. They're not quite sure how it was, but they have some sort of idea. They're creating these gods from that. And then there are thousands and thousands of people that are feeding their energy into these reconstructed deities or gods. I believe that makes them powerful. It makes them at least an egregore, if not a god. If you don't believe in gods, that's fine. But I can argue they're at least a powerful egregore that one could work with. And as far as planetary magic goes, I personally feel like planetary magic can fit in with any magical practice. I love planetary magic. And also as a chaos magician, like I mentioned, I really like to mix and match. So, you know, that's my answer, I guess, is, you know, do what works. The next question is, I have always believed that things you need in your practice show up when you need them. It's part of my thrifty craft, from what I find in shops to what I find in nature. I have always sent out into the world for what I need, and I usually get it. But this past year and change, I have been finding statues of deities a lot. Many Buddhas, Ganesha, Shiva, Venus, Aphrodite, Athena, Gaia, Victory, Diana, Odin, Cupid, and some Aztec ones, etc. I'm not usually one who works with or believes in deities, but I really believe I'm being drawn in that direction. How would someone who doesn't quite believe start working in that direction? So this again goes along with what we were talking about earlier. Start working with them as psychological archetypes. I feel like that's a great entry point for anyone, and it's still, as I mentioned in the beginning, a very powerful thing. Even if you only ever work with them as psychological archetypes, then you cannot push yourself past that to believe anything else. Nothing wrong with that. It's still a very powerful form of practicing, and it can change your life immensely. So if you are naturally being drawn in that energy, I would recommend being the mad scientist that you are, getting experimental and just seeing where it takes you, and not putting any sort of pressure on yourself to have to label yourself as any one particular thing. I call myself an atheist and an agnostic person and a pantheist all at the same time. So like, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. But I think starting with them as psychological archetypes in your mind, just pieces of your subconscious mind that you can tap into. So if you're working with, you know, Aphrodite or Shiva or whatever it is, you are accessing that archetypal energy within yourself, within your own subconscious mind, and pulling that to the surface. And sometimes that can be really powerful because you need some sort of trigger to even be able to pull that energy out of your subconscious in the first place. So if you're using deities as that trigger, more power to you. That's amazing. It's potentially something that you wouldn't be able to reach inside of yourself anyways. Sometimes I will even push myself to work with archetypes that are drastically different from me, like totally different from me, just to see how it feels, to see if I can even create that energy in my body in the first place. For example, I tend to be a little bit more of a serious person. I have a hard time being playful. I've just never been playful. I had to grow up really, really fast when I was young, and I've been serious my whole life. I was a serious kid, I'm a serious adult. And so I try to push myself to work with archetypes that are a little bit more playful and fun, a little bit more childlike, because I want to access that piece of my subconscious mind, that piece of myself that is a little bit more childlike and playful, and pull that to the surface. Without that trigger of using a deity in order to do that, I don't know how else I would be able to access that energy. So again, just start there, see where it goes for you. I'm hoping that the answers to these questions so far have been helpful, so you have to let me know. And the last question that we have in this category is, I know in older videos you described yourself as more of an atheist. Might have been in other words, definitely not trying to define you. No worries, I can't even define myself, it's all good. And I'm curious how your relationship with and perception of larger cosmic power, like God, spirits, creation, source, divine, etc., has evolved. I feel like you've dropped little hints here and there about changing, and I would just love to know more about what you feel comfortable sharing. Thank you so much for asking and so much for caring. As I've already kind of mentioned in this whole chat about gods and whether they're real and whether they're not real or whatever, I think as of right now, I'm really identifying more as a pantheist, which is this idea that there is energy in everything. There is energy in me, in you, in my dogs, rocks outside, trees outside. All of us have this collective energy, and we are all part of this pool of consciousness. And I think I'll talk about this pool a little bit more when we get into the next category, when we talk about spirits and death, because I've gotten this question a lot. How can you be an atheist, or how can you not believe in gods but then believe in spirits? That just doesn't make sense. But for me, it does make sense, and I will explain that. But as of right now, I'm a bit more of a pantheist. I do believe everything has spirit, or at least some sort of energetic qualities, and all of that energy collects together into this pool. Now, whether we could call that pool one god and really be a monotheist about it, or whether we could say that there are a bunch of deities in that pool that help control certain types of energies, in which case you could say you're more of a polytheist. I don't really know. Here's the thing, I think it's all real, because if I'm a pantheist, let me go on a rant here for a second. If I'm a pantheist, I don't necessarily identify as a monotheist or a polytheist. I don't necessarily believe that there are gods up in the sky dictating what's going to happen or having some sort of control or whatever. But if I think about this pool of consciousness that everything, you know, trickles back to and recycles back to, this pool of consciousness could be considered a god, or at least a really strong egregore, but I would maybe put it in the god category. And so from that perspective, does that make me a monotheist? Because I believe in this pool of energy that is maybe potentially one god. And then within that pool of energy, there are all these different types of energy swirling around. And so there is the potential for different gods underneath the big god. And so does that make me a polytheist? Because I believe in all these different gods under the umbrella of one potential god, or one unit of a collective unconscious or subconscious or whatever. Because all of those gods under the umbrella of this one big pool of energy can potentially harness or work with specific kinds of energy. So let's say you are working with the Morrigan. She potentially could help you with death, let's say. I know I'm oversimplifying the Morrigan right now, okay? But just using this as an example, saying that she works with death energy, maybe she is one god inside of the giant pool of gods. So I could technically classify myself as a pantheist, a monotheist, a polytheist, and an atheist all at the same time, because as an atheist, I don't necessarily believe that they're, you know, up in the clouds and that they have control over our lives, but I do also potentially believe that we can work with that energy if we choose to tap into the pool. I don't know, it's just a really complicated. I don't think there's any word that really fully encompasses what I believe in. So in short, that's kind of where I'm at as far as the gods go. Sometimes I work with them as psychological archetypes. Sometimes I work with them as a way to access a certain type of energy from the pool, from the collective unconscious. So it's tough to talk about this kind of stuff because it gets so abstract and so big. The next category that we are going to talk about is spirits and death magic, and I have to give you a little update. I had to take like an hour break today. I am so slow moving today, and I'm feeling really fatigued. So if my energy is weird, it's just because I'm tired. I would normally film on another day, but this is actually the only day this week that works for me to sit down and film this video, because this is, you know, a little bit longer of a video. So anyways, I'm going to be taking breaks throughout filming this video. I took the whole day off. I was like, okay, this whole day is going to be dedicated to filming this video. That way I can do a section, take a long break, come back to it, etc. So I just took a long break, had a little bit of lunch. Now I'm coming back. All right, so we're talking about spirits and death magic. So the first question is, how do you approach working with a new spirit, specifically when you know that it is there and haven't had very direct communication with it beyond offerings? So I'm glad to hear that you started with offerings. That's what I always start with. If there's a new spirit that I'm wanting to connect with, I always start by leaving out offerings for it, whether it be a shiny token, something shiny, or whether I am giving them, you know, some sort of food item. I bake a little bit extra for them or whatever. offer, if I'm leaving out a little cup of tea or a little cup of coffee for them, whatever it is, I always start with offerings. And then beyond that, I personally really love working with tarot. I think I might have already mentioned this before in some of my other videos, but I usually get out my tarot deck, and I know that people would probably prefer to work with the pendulum rather than tarot and have that spirit help guide the pendulum so you can have a conversation with it. But I really love tarot because I feel like it provides a little bit more of a robust conversation. So what I do is I sit down in the space where the spirit is inhabiting. I bring an offering, I sit down with that offering, and if I'm working with them for the first time, I'm asking them openly, I'm literally saying this out loud, to come into this space, let's have a conversation if you want to have a conversation. Sometimes they don't show up because they don't want to have a conversation with you. Sometimes they do show up and it's great. What I usually do is I start with some clarifying questions. So the first question I ask is, are you here? Sometimes I can feel whether the spirit is here or not, but if you're someone that hasn't quite developed that part of your psychic abilities yet, if you aren't really sure if you feel the spirit's presence or not, you can simply ask yes or no, are you here? And with the tarot decks, there are some tarot cards that really do indicate a yes and some tarot cards that indicate a no. So I kind of interpret it as the more positive, uplifting cards I would take as a yes, and the more maybe negative or challenging cards I would take as a no. So I would just pull a quick yes or no tarot card to see if the spirit is here with me. I don't really do this anymore though, because I can feel when a spirit is in my space. This is just for someone that's kind of unsure whether the spirit is even there or not. And then I proceed to ask questions like, who are you, or how would you describe yourself? And then I would pull some tarot cards to see what comes up and how they would describe themselves. I would ask maybe what they want or what I can help them with, how they would like our relationship to proceed from here. So I would just continue asking these clarifying questions as I'm pulling tarot cards, and it gives a much better conversation. Usually in the beginning of sitting down to do a tarot reading with the spirit, I let them know that they are allowed to tap me on the hand whenever I'm hovering over a specific card that they want. So I spread the tarot cards out, I slowly hover my hand over all of them, and I ask them, if you want to, you are allowed to touch me, you are allowed to give me some sort of signal or sensation whenever I am hovering over the card that you want. I personally believe that tarot cards are alive, that they do have a spirit, and that all the cards vibrate at different frequencies. And I think that spirits are a little bit more sensitive to that than humans are. So I believe that spirits are able to communicate through tarot cards because they are able to connect with the certain frequencies that they're wanting, with every card having a slightly different frequency. So I know some people get really analytical and they say, well, how does the spirit even know which card it wants? I think that because both of these energies are spirits, they're living in the fourth dimension as far as my own perspective goes. It's a little bit more complicated and out of the human realm, so we don't really have to psychoanalyze that too much. So I just kind of tell the spirit, you're allowed to touch me if you want to, just tap me on the hand or give me a little, you know, a buzzing sensation or something when I'm hovering over the card that you want, and then I proceed to have the conversation. So that's kind of how I do it. Offerings, sitting down to do a tarot reading, that's pretty much my go-to, and I don't usually deviate from that too much. So the next question is, I wanted to ask on what your personal interpretation or opinion is on how spirits of the dead work in the afterlife or here in this realm, and how they work in general. So I have to kind of give my opinion on death before I answer this question. I believe that when we die, we all go into a pool of collective energy. So when we die, our bodies start deteriorating into the ground, but our spirit goes somewhere else, or the energetic core of our being goes back to this pool of collective energy. This is kind of what I was talking about when I was discussing this in the gods section. But within that pool of collective energy, to me, it's all oneness. There is no separation. It's not like there are a bunch of different spirits sitting in this collective pool. It's all one pool of energy. And the reason why I believe that this is true is because through my meditations, especially through the period that I had as a Zen Buddhist, I really reached this point of conclusion within myself that there was no separation, because when I would meditate, I felt this unconditional love and completeness, and it felt like it was a whole piece rather than a bunch of separate pieces. That is my own personal gnosis on the matter. And when someone is reborn, that energy is extracted from the pool and reborn as something else, as another human, as a tree, as a rock, as an animal, whatever. And so within that pool of collective energy, let's say there are Lego pieces. I've kind of explained this a little bit before, and if you've watched that collaboration that I did with Olivia, we talked about death, and her and I both have the same exact views on this, but I view it as Lego pieces. You know, let's say that something's being reborn into the world, and it is going to be a tree or a rock or an animal or something, and you need 3 blue Lego pieces and 1 yellow Lego piece and 1 green, and that creates the new creature that is coming out of the pool of energy. I think that our Lego pieces are not necessarily the same as we are existing on this physical plane. Like if I look at another person, maybe I'm made up of 3 blue Legos and 2 red Legos, and then that person is made up of 5 purple Legos and 1 green. You know, we're all slightly different, but all of those Lego pieces go back into that pool of energy at the end of the day. So when it comes to death and working with spirits, I think it gets a little complicated, because I do believe that when we die, we go back into this pool and we get recycled as something else. So I do believe that there is potential that our loved ones that have passed on have been reborn as something else. But here's where it gets extra complicated. I do think that we have energetic cords that tie us to everything that we are emotionally connected to. So I have energetic cords with everyone, with my partner, with my mom, my dad, even with my mailman. And the size of the energetic cord and the strength of the energetic cord is really dependent on how deep of a relationship I have with that person. So let's say I have a grandparent that passed on. I do have an energetic cord with that grandparent because of the relationship that I had with them. That energy is tied together. And so even though my grandparent may have passed on, gone into the pool of energy and been reborn as something else, I still have an energetic cord that is tethered to that energy of what they once were. So I can use that tether to trace my way back to the energetic pool and harness that particular type of energy arrangement, that specific arrangement of Legos that created my grandparent. And so when I am summoning my grandparent, excuse me ma'am, you are summoning that energetic arrangement, and then your brain is also filling in the gaps because you have this memory of them. And so you're working with that same exact energy, and then also with the input of your memories with them, you're able to kind of recreate that spiritual entity. This is not quite coming out the way that I want it to come out, because it's such a complicated concept for me to try to convey to someone else. But I think we can pull on those energetic tethers back into the collective to reach people that have passed on. Now, I also believe that there can potentially be unfinished business. So if someone were to die in a really horrific way, and they were in an extremely emotional, like an emotionally heightened state when they pass on, I believe that there can be glitches and a fault within the system. I do believe that there are some spirits that maybe didn't fully get recycled back into that collective pool of energy, and they are left here between this plane and another plane, and they're not really sure where to go from there. So from that respect, you are able to work with the spirits as they are actually existing on this plane, because they still are kind of existing on this plane. They have not been recycled back to the collective pool of consciousness properly. And I'm just talking about humans right now, by the way, because spirits is a broad term. Spirits can encompass non-human entities as well, like fourth dimensional beings and beyond that. So right now I'm just talking about humans and potentially pets, earthly beings, I guess. But there was no resolution when that creature, that human or that animal, passed on, and so they were not able to be recycled properly back into the collective. And so that's where you get like haunted houses, or you buy a new house and you walk through it and you're like, ooh, there's some weird energy left over here. There's something going on here. And that's also potentially why you are able to work with some spirits who have not been recycled back into the collective a lot better than, say, that grandparent parent that passed on that you really want to connect to and you just have not been able to call them through. I think some spirits are going to be a little bit easier to access than others, and that access level is going to be dependent on where they are in the fourth dimension on this earthly plane, whether they're in the collective pool, whether they've already been reborn from the collective pool. So anyways, that's kind of like a general synopsis of how I see spirits. And it's funny because I mentioned earlier that I get this question a lot of how can you not believe in gods, but then how do you believe in spirits? And so I hope this better explains how I view spirits versus how I view gods. Again, spirits is such a, I'm talking about, you know, like I said, human spirits here, because we could go on a whole rant about other spirits, right? I mean, fourth dimensional creatures, like fae-like beings that are not even human at all. And I personally believe that they all reside on the fourth dimension and that we are not able to see it because we are 3D human beings. I'm spinning in circles, and that was way beyond what the question asked. So anyways, the next question is, after we passed, do you think our eyes will close for the last time and that nothing will happen while our spirit continues on its way? Or do you think that in the form of our spirit, we will open our eyes to a new reality, dimension, to this place that brings us all together in another form of consciousness? So I kind of already answered this in the previous questions. I think it's really, really complicated. I don't necessarily think that we will open our eyes to a new reality in the human sense because we are no longer human at that point, but I do believe that we will enter a new reality, if we want to call it a reality, being in that pool of consciousness. I could argue both because the word, well, let me just read again. So do you think that our eyes will close for the last time and that nothing will happen? Yes, I believe that, but I also believe that in the form of spirit, we can open our eyes to a new reality, dimension, and to a place that brings us all together. It's almost like the death of the human, because to be human is to be on this earthly plane, but you are being reborn as something completely different. So I could say that yes, as a human, we do close our eyes for the last time, but that's because we are transitioning into something beyond human. And so it's a totally different experience. Anyways, so that is my perspective on that. So the next question is, as we approach the best, spookiest time of year, I'd love for you to share any ghost or spooky paranormal experiences that you've had. I actually already answered this in another Q&A, so I just wanted to kind of put that out there. I'm pretty sure it was in the 10K Q&A. I'm gonna do my homework. This is a note for editing Ivy right now. Find the Q&A that has the spooky story in it, and I will link it down in the description box below, because I don't want to, you know, go through the whole story all over again if people have already heard it. I only have one really spooky, not even spooky, but just a really uncomfortable experience with a ghost, a spirit or whatever. It ended up resolving itself, but it was a huge learning curve for me when I first started working with spirits, and it was really kind of creepy. It creeped me out. So anyways, I won't retell that whole story, but I actually don't have a ton of horror stories when it comes to ghosts and spirits and all of that. I've actually had a really nice experience, but I also do my research and I approach spirits with a very respectful manner, and I think that has a lot to do with it as well. If you go into spirit work being totally fearful, that's exactly the type of energy that you're going to attract back to you. So, you know, I think going into it without really having a lot of fear to start with, and just being very not respectable, but being very respectful of that spirit and of its territory and its space, and just trying to honor that, giving offerings and things like that. I haven't really had that many bad experiences. I've even spent the night in creepy graveyards. Like, I was hunting for creepy experiences, and I never really got, well, I did get that one that I was referring to earlier, but other than that, I've had really great experiences with them. I think people really do fear things that they don't understand, and so even if a spirit is really nice and welcoming and sweet, some people are going to view them as really creepy and scary simply for the fact that they are a spirit, and spirits are an unknown entity, and it's terrifying to interact with them. Even more troublesome spirits that have given a lot of people grief, I've been able to talk to them and not have as scary of an experience, because it's like a dance, you know? It's like a dance of figuring out, what do they want? How can I help you? Do you want me to leave you the hell alone? What is it? Let's figure it out together so both of us can be happy. And sometimes I feel like spirits just want to talk and they just want company. And in my experience, I think they get really tired of being scary to people. So there are trickster spirits though, there's always those, but you know, you can always tell them to go away. It's not a big deal. So the next question is, I would love to know about your positive experiences working with a spirit board and your experiences doing it alone if you have any. There's so many videos about the negativity surrounding it, but not a lot about the positive aspects. I would was actually thinking about doing a video about this because I think I've said in my videos before, there's so much fear mongering around spirits and working with them. And it just like kills my heart a little bit because my interactions have been fantastic. And I know there's always exceptions and whatnot, but I really just don't like all the fear mongering that goes into our community sometimes because again, people fear something that they don't understand. And so I get frustrated because the spirits don't deserve that type of energy, you know? If you are absolutely terrified of ghosts and spirits, then just don't work with spirits because you are probably gonna freak yourself out more than the spirit. The spirit could probably be doing nothing at all and you'll be freaking yourself out over nothing. I think we are gonna talk about fear a little bit more in the mental health section, just fear in general when it comes to occult studies and things, so I'll go a little bit deeper in that. But positive experiences, I mean, there is a way to approach a spirit board. You have to be respectful. And again, I was thinking about doing a video on this. You don't want to just be whipping it out like it's a card game or something, or a board game that you play with your friends not knowing what the hell you're doing. You want to put your research into it and figure out how it works, how to open the board, how to close the board, etc. I would say for me, my experiences with spirit boards have actually been pretty uneventful, which is really frustrating. I have better luck talking to spirits through tarot and even pendulum, which I don't even like pendulum. I dislike pendulum. I'm trying to get better at it, but I've had better interactions and better conversations with spirits through tarot than I have through spirit boards. And I think everybody has their medium, you know, that they enjoy to use. And for spirit boards, I'm actively trying it a little bit more, but for me, it has just been really kind of uneventful. So I don't know if I can share a lot of positive experiences. It's more just kind of like meh, neutral experiences because I just prefer tarot so much. But keep on the lookout for a spirit board video because that will come at one point. I wanted to do it during spooky season, but I've got so many other videos planned. I don't know. We'll see when we get to that. Next question is, do you feel or perceive spirits as almost a physical like presence or more like sentient energy? Or is it something else entirely? Also, same question, but instead of spirits, what about gods? Okay, so I'm so excited to talk about the distinction between those two because spirits, it depends on the type of spirit, because for me, I feel like there are lesser spirits and then there are bigger spirits, but for me, it feels almost like a staticky sensation or like a vibration or a pressure. Again, every spirit's a little bit different, but I will feel almost like this pressure. Like if you can feel this little bubble around you, and then if a human were to step into your bubble and get like really close up to your face, you can feel it, right? You can feel it when somebody's right in front of your face. It feels like there's less air to breathe. There's a lot more pressure on you. They have invaded your aura. Like you feel it. And for me, that's the exact same with spirits. And sometimes I'll get tingly sensations or it just really depends. I really feel like the static electricity though, that's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably the one that's the most common. It's just this sensation, I can't even describe it. It's literally like static, like you hear static and you can feel that it's either, you know, coming from the left or from the right or whatever. Sometimes I'll have bodily sensations, like I'll start to get really hot or really cold. Sometimes, you know, if we're communicating, I'll have some images that pop up in my head. I am not an expert medium. I just have to say that. The mediumship abilities that I have are probably the most untrained psychic abilities that I have. I'm really trying to work hard to better hone in my mediumship skills because right now it's so all over the place and it's so difficult. It's probably one of the hardest psychic abilities I've ever tried to improve. And I'm sure it's just going to be a lifelong experience. I mean, I'm only in my 30s. I got a lifetime to go, you know, to really try to master this, if mastery is even a thing. But anyways, so for spirits, I feel like spirits feel a little bit more visceral for me. I can really feel the bodily sensations and the pressure and the static. Gods are different. Gods are totally different. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, when we were talking about gods, it feels more delicate. It feels so much more delicate. Like the god is too big to encompass one part of the room or one part of your body or whatever. The god is everywhere in all things, all around you. And so for me, it's almost, it doesn't matter even what god I'm working with, any god, it feels a lot more delicate and subtle. It's like a subtle art working with gods. And sometimes I'm wondering if maybe that's just because our bodies can't handle it. Like our bodies can handle interactions with spirits because they're lesser beings, but interaction with gods, I can imagine that that is an immense amount of energy, and our bodies are not trained for that whatsoever. They're not built to hold that kind of energy. I mean, there are times, you know what? There are times where I invoke a god into my being, but yeah, I guess that would be my experience, is that it's a lot more delicate and subtle with gods, whereas spirits, for me, it's a little bit more visceral. Next question is, I would love to ask for recommendations, aka books, videos, websites to use for spirit boards or Ouija boards. I've tried to investigate, but there is just so much misinformation and fear that I'm not sure where to start. Yeah, that is the problem, isn't it? That fear mongering is a problem, and misinformation too. I do not have any resources at this time, and I wish I did. When I do that spirit board video, before I film it, I'm going to collect a lot of really good resources and have it in the video. As of right now, I'm still working through a lot of books on this subject, and I'm weeding through the ones that I would not recommend and the ones that I would recommend. So at this time, I cannot officially say that I have a list of recommendations for you, but definitely be on the lookout for that spirit board video, because I will have resources, hopefully an actual list or something at that point. My question is, I'm nervous to work with deities, but I feel comfortable with my ancestors. My issue is, I believe in reincarnation. So how do I know that, say my grandma is still in the spiritual realm? Do they call to you? How would you know if an ancestor wants to work with you if they are ancestors from generations ago? So this kind of ties into what I was originally talking about in the beginning of this section. I believe that at that point, if you are somebody that also believes in a little, somewhat of a reincarnation situation, I believe that you are working with the energetic cord that is tied from you to that energy that goes all the way into the collective pool of energy, of course. But you're working with that cord to work with your grandma, even if that energy has already been recycled back into the earth or reborn into something else. No one is ever going to be your grandma again, right? Because your grandma had a very specific arrangement of Legos, a very specific arrangement of energy, and it was housed in a very specific body, and it was tied with very specific memories that you have. So you're working with that energetic cord going all the way back to the collective pool of energy, and using the cord to tap into that energy, as well as pairing it with your own memories and your own dimension of thought to work with that entity. I hate referring to grandmas as entities. That's not what I meant to say. Spirit, you know what I'm talking about. So as far as the question goes, how would you know if an ancestor wants to work with you if they're ancestors from generations ago? So you're just gonna have to look for signs, just like you would with any other spirit or any other deity. You know, look into your heritage a little bit and see who your ancient ancestors even were. For me, I have a lot of ancestors that lived in the area of the Celts. So I would look more into Celtic heritage and see if some of those symbols are popping up into my life. Maybe if there is a symbol that relates to the Celts, maybe I look around in my daily life and see if that symbol starts popping up for me, or if there are specific animals that are showing up that related to your ancient ancestors. You might want to look into some of the stories and some of the mythology that that relate to your ancient ancestors. What did they believe in? What types of food did they eat? You know, you really want to learn about their lifestyle, and that way you can figure out how they're going to communicate with you, because everyone's ancestors are different. So if you have foods that relate to them that are showing up a lot in your life in really weird ways, or like I said, animals or stories from mythology that seem to be popping up out of the blue, you can assume that maybe your ancient ancestors are trying to reach out to you, or at least trying to maybe push you to learn about your heritage a little bit more. And I think you just being interested in general is a sign. You being interested in your heritage or working with ancient ancestors, there's no harm in trying, you know. Sorry. There's something here with me right now. I just got, immediately as I was talking, someone's here. I don't know who's here, but I felt it. Anyways, you being interested in that is, woo! I just got a huge wave of emotion. So I don't know who's here, but man, there is a lot of emotion going on right now. I am not a medium, and I don't claim to be a medium because I don't feel like I've earned that title, but I will say whoever's here right now wants you to know it. So anyways, look into your ancient ancestors and learn about them a little bit more, because it's possible that, like I said, you just being interested in them is a sign in itself. Next question is, I work as a professional medium, and I'd say my mediumship probably looks close to what a spiritualist would practice. I know that mediumship is woven into many other practices such as witchcraft and shamanism, wondering what your experience and viewpoints are on mediumship as an occultist. I think I've kind of touched on this just like throughout all the other questions as we're talking about spirits and death. Like I said, I don't call myself a medium because I feel like that title, it just, for me, it holds a lot of prestige, and I don't feel like I've earned that. I feel like my psychic abilities in this realm are totally out of control, and so I don't want to call myself a medium until I'm at a point where I feel like I can actually educate others and have a little bit more control over what's going on. But yeah, I feel like I already answered this question throughout all of the other questions, my viewpoints and my experience working with spirits and ghosts and talking about death and being recycled back into the collective pool of consciousness and working with energetic tethers and all of that. So I hope that that answered your question. Okay, now we're going to move on to the category of witchcraft and spell work. So this next question is, I would love to hear your thoughts about a spell working to enhance communication, bond, and or partnership all around a romantic relationship. My fiance and I struggle lately in these areas. I know he loves me as I do him, but with the stress of having another baby, buying a home, and all the things that happen once you've been together 5+ years, things have gotten hard. I would love to promote healthy growth. I feel this so much because I've been with my partner for over 5 years. And yeah, having longer relationships in the past, yeah, that is a struggle. So I do have some suggestions for you. I have a love altar in our bedroom. So I highly recommend, if you don't have a love altar, get one set up. We have a dresser in our bedroom, and on top of the dresser is purely dedicated to our love altar. And my partner doesn't really care what I put there. It's great. So I can set up our little situation for us and help promote that love, that passion, that, you know, connectedness and intimacy in the bedroom. And I'm not just talking about sexual intimacy, I'm talking about emotional intimacy as well. So some things I have on the altar are, I was thinking about doing a tour of that at some point, you know, leaving out some of the more sensitive stuff. But so I have a sacral chakra candle on there because I am very much into the biopsychology of color and how it relates to different energy centers in your body. So I have this big, beautiful orange candle with a sigil on it. And so what I do, I would recommend creating a sigil for you and your partner that you use anytime that you do spell work on your specific relationship. So what I've done is I've taken my first name and my partner's first name, and I have created a sigil out of both of those names. And the sigil kind of binds us together a little bit. So anyways, create a sigil that you can use on pretty much any working you do for your relationship that represents both of you. It doesn't have to be through your names. It could be through some other identifying factor or whatever. So I've carved that sigil onto the big, beautiful orange candle, and I anoint it with love oils or passion oils or intimacy, whatever. So I've got this big candle on the altar. And then I also have this little salt bowl. Oh, this is so cool. So if you are married, which I have to go back, fiance, okay, you do have rings. Okay, so I don't know if your fiance has a ring yet or not. I'm assuming that you at least have an engagement ring. So you could just use your engagement ring in this case if they don't have a wedding band yet or not. But what I have is a little salt bowl mixed with some rose petals. I've got a couple little drops of essential oil in there, just correspondences that relate to, you can even take like rose quartz sand and do that instead of the salt. Or you can also do witch's red salt. There's red salt you can get, so, or make yourself or whatever. Maybe throw in a little bit of cinnamon in there to like spice things up a little bit. But you have this bowl filled with all these different correspondences for passion, for love, romance, intimacy, whatever. And then anytime you feel like things are getting stagnant in your life or in your relationship, you would take your rings and set it in that bowl and let it have a salt bath. Let it cleanse all of the gunk, all of the stagnant energy, all of the whatever, and you can let it cleanse. I usually let the rings sit overnight for 3 nights if I can. And then we both put our rings back on feeling a lot more invigorated and like that stagnant energy has really been cleansed. So I like using the ring as a, oh, I guess I don't have my ring on right now, my engagement ring, but I usually use that as a symbol of our love and our connection. And I put it in the salt bowl every time I'm pissed off at my partner or they're pissed off at me or we're just like having a low or whatever, stick it in the salt bowl, let it recharge for 3 nights, and then put the rings back on and feel that weight lifted off of you. So I hope those suggestions help. I would definitely recommend at least getting a love altar in your bedroom so you can do love workings there and set the ambiance in the bedroom if you need to. The next question is, how do you have more play and fun in your your witchcraft practice while developing those psychic and spellcasting skills. I would say this is something, I wish I had really good advice here, but I am, as I mentioned previously, I'm a little bit more of a serious person, and it's difficult for me to be playful and to be childlike. And so this is something that I'm actively working on for myself. But I would say what's really helped me is I view everything through the lens of color and magic. So even when let's say I'm like walking the dogs, I'm taking the dogs out, I'm viewing everything as if it is magical, and I'm seeing spirits and energy everywhere. So as I'm walking throughout the neighborhood or whatever, I would visualize the trees connected together with these wisps of energy or energetic cords, and having them talk to each other, and visualizing which spirits or which trees are smiling at other trees. And I'm visualizing the plants opening up and saying hello to the sun, and I'm visualizing color everywhere. So I think for me, it's a lot of visualization. I know visualization isn't really for everybody, but it really does make the most mundane things a lot more fun, because when I'm going to take the dog for a walk and I don't really want to, I can walk around my neighborhood and try to connect with all the plant spirits as I'm walking in my neighborhood, or trying to attempt to see the fourth dimension a little bit more. Or if I'm in the kitchen and I'm cooking something or whatever, I'm pretending that I'm making potions and brews, which technically I kind of am making potions and brews, but you know, you can bring in some of that mad scientist archetypal energy that I was talking about earlier in the video, and pretending that you are experimenting in a lab and you've got bubbling cauldrons all around you, and really just painting this fantasy picture of everything around you for everything that you're doing. So visualization for me is really how I've been able to make things more fun, make things a little bit more playful. But again, I'm not the best person to ask about this, so if anybody else has some tips for this, please feel free to put them in the comment box below, of course. How do you do protection magic for kids or pets? So what I like to do, there's a couple different ways that you can go about this, but I like to make poppets. I do have a video on poppets, so you're more than welcome to go check that out. But you can make a poppet of your child or of your pet, and then do the protection working around the poppet. And the idea is anything that you do to the poppet is also being done to the child or to the dog, etc. But let's say you have a dog that you want to do some protection magic on. I have protection amulets that I have created for them, and I have them on their collars. So you can take the dog collar and a little tag or whatever, and then take that tag and turn it into a protection amulet. I do also have a video on talismans and amulets and how to create them and everything. But that's what I would say for animals, is really working with the collars and adding some protection magic into those collars. For kids, it's a different thing, right? Because you don't put collars and leashes on your children and they change their outfits every day. So you could also do this with glamour magic with your children. So if you're brushing their hair, you've got scrunchies that you use on them, or maybe even just the lotion that you apply to your child, you can use glamour magic as a way to protect them. One of my favorite glamours that I'm going to be talking about soon, because I have a video coming up where we're going to talk about glamours and sex, and I'm really, really, really excited for that one. But one of my favorite glamours is invisibility. I have totally mastered the art of invisibility, and that is a form of protection. So you can work with glamour magic, and you know, as you're rubbing on that lotion, let's say on your child's legs or arms or whatever, you could make up a little spell or a little incantation or enchant the lotion as an act to help them be a little bit more invisible to predators, to danger, to whatever. So use glamours to maybe hide your child if you need to, or to make them appear a certain way or whatever, to protect them a little bit more. But I think poppets is probably my best suggestion for that, because then you can easily just do whatever working you want around the poppet. It's so much easier. How do you recommend becoming more integrated with your spirituality and witchiness on a daily mundane basis? I find myself deeply connected with a very real sense of my own power and existence when I am connected, but it's like I can't maintain a small sense of that self or part of me in daily life. To a degree, I know this is human nature and a positive thing. I don't want to detach from being that person, just want to be more integrated as a whole. I think this is something that everybody struggles with. I know it's something that I struggle with a lot sometimes, feeling connected to my spirituality, and I do go through lulls and I do need to take a break from it. But I would say, I guess on the average, everything I do is magic. Even if I'm in my kitchen making a cup of tea or whatever, I am brewing a potion that is going to heal parts of me with the nutrients from these tea leaves or whatever it is that I'm drinking. Or when I'm making something, I'm also really, really invested in nutrition nutrition just in general, but the food that I'm making, the nutrients in those, every food has some sort of metaphysical properties associated with it, and it's healing part of my soul or whatever. So everything that I'm doing on the mundane is very witchy. Even when I'm playing video games and I'm sitting down and I'm totally dead inside and I just need to zone out when I'm playing video games, that is magic. I am creating hyper sigils. I'm creating long form narratives in the characters that I'm playing. So I think being able to reframe things is one thing when you're looking at your mundane life and realizing that everything that you do is magical, even if you're not sitting down to cast a spell. Like I said, even if you're sitting on the couch playing video games, you are technically creating some sort of hyper sigil out of the character that you're playing in your game. So all of it's magic. Everything is magic. But I will say, for me, I'm really affected by the aesthetic of my place. So for me personally, what helps me feel more integrated is really creating the witchy life that I want. Because if you are going to a job that you hate, that is really, really difficult for you to make it magical, or if you're dealing with things on a regular basis that are so not magical whatsoever and so not in alignment with what your soul truly wants, it's going to be so hard to stay in that frame of mind. And so I think it's important to cultivate the life that we want. If you want to be that witch that lives in a cottage out in the forest, okay, maybe that's not actually financially feasible, but how can you recreate that? How can you feel like the witch out in the cottage in the middle of nowhere in the forest? What you can do is you can do a whole room makeover and really play up the aesthetics in your current space to make it feel like you are that witch. Like I said, for me, aesthetics, I don't want to seem superficial here, but I am so affected by aesthetics. If I'm not in this witchy room, it's harder for me to feel more magical. It's harder for me to stay more connected to my spirituality, etc. But when I walk in this room and I have all of my spiritual tools around me, they're laid out in an aesthetically pleasing way. The paint on the walls really makes me feel like a witch in the forest. All of these things make me feel a certain way so that I want to do magic. When I walk into this room, I want to cast a spell because I'm feeling the vibes when I'm in here. So maybe take a look at your environments and see how you can make them witchier. I know some people are in the broom closet and that's really difficult to do. Even if you can create an altar that you can hide under your bed and then just pull it out whenever you want to sit down and feel more magically connected. But yeah, I would really play with the aesthetics in your place to make it feel like you're living that witchy life, and then also to get rid of things in your life that don't make you feel witchy or in some sort of spiritual alignment with your true will or your highest good, or however you want to say that. If something really makes you feel disconnected from your spirituality and your craft, maybe reassess, is this something that's necessary? Do I need to have this in my life? And if I do need to have it in my life, how can I create pockets of time where I'm doing this thing and then the rest of the time I am immersed in my spirituality and feeling in comfort with what is in alignment with what feels good to my soul? I don't even know if any of that made sense, but that is my answer to that. What is your opinion on love spells? Do you think that it can backfire in an unsuspected way? Should one use a spell for letting go instead? It depends on the type of love spell, because there are many different types of love spells. I mean, think of self-love spells, right? Like, self-love spells are still love spells, and I'm very much pro self-love. So I would say as a whole, if I'm thinking about how I feel about love spells, do it. Just depends on what kind of love spell you want. I think that they can be really helpful, but it sounds like this is more geared towards spells that are trying to potentially influence another person into loving you the way that you want to be loved. And that is where things get sticky and tricky. And yes, I do believe that things can backfire in unusual ways. I did do a video on my channel once where I talked about free will and discussing whether or not we do have free will. And regardless of whether you believe that we actually have free will or not, I do believe that every person has will, at least some sort of will. Whether it's free or not is up for debate, but everybody has some sort of will. And when you're trying to cast a spell on someone else to influence them to think the way you want them to think or act the way that you want them to act, you are trying to influence their will. You're trying to overpower their will with the power of your will. And I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it's extremely difficult and it can lead to things backfiring in unsuspecting ways. So I don't think it's ever an effective way to go about about magic, trying to influence someone else to do what you want them to do. Instead, you would want to maybe do an attraction spell. Try to attract the things that you want in your life. And whether that's the current partner that you're working with, or maybe a new partner that comes along, you would do some sort of attraction spell to attract the type of energy that you're wanting. If you want a loving and kind and honest partner, put that energy out there, do some spell work to attract that to you. And then maybe your existing partner or your existing crush will fulfill that, or maybe they won't. And then you guys break up, and then someone else comes along who can better fit that role for you. So I really love attraction spells versus love spells to influence or manipulate another person. And then as far as the last question, should one use a spell for letting go instead? That is entirely up to you. It's hard for me to give advice without knowing like the full backstory, because every situation is going to be very different. Yes, letting go spells or cord cuttings or whatever can be super helpful, but I really think attraction spells for me is where it's at, because you are attracting what you want into your life rather than focusing on the things that you don't want, which is kind of funny that I say that because I just did a whole video about the law of attraction, and this sounds very law of attraction-y, but whatever. You get what I'm trying to say here. I think that it's good to focus on the things that you want versus the things that you don't want, and then hopefully you will be able to manifest that energy in some form or another. My question is, can you give some interpretations of reading spell work? For example, doing spell work and your plate breaks or a candle goes out, etc. I actually don't read into signs like this. No, that's not true. I will say the majority of the time, I don't read into signs like this. If a plate breaks or a candle goes out or something or whatever during spell work, I'm always going to take the mundane over the magical, and I'm going to say, okay, well, that was really odd, but if something continues to happen, if there are repeated signs of something happening and there's a pattern that develops, then I start to pay closer attention to it and say, wait a minute, I think there's something else going on here, and there's some sort of signal that maybe this isn't working out or whatever. But there's so much that could potentially go wrong just for mundane reasons. Even a candle going out, or it blowing in a certain direction, or a candle, you know, melting down weird. It really can just depend on how the candle was made. So yeah, I don't usually look into signs that much. I will say, sometimes I will read the candle wax after doing a spell. So like if I do a spell and then the candle burns down fully, I will read the wax on the plate that it was burning on, or the candle holder or whatever. If it looks like just a bunch of, you know, swirls and whatever, and it doesn't look like anything in particular, great. It looks like it was a clean burn. I don't really have much to worry about. This spell is going to manifest, that's fine. But if for some reason I see like, you know, maybe an explosion, lots of jaggedy edges, or maybe there's like a face in the wax that has melted down, or a creature, or, you know, I'm seeing something out of it, then I would look into it a little bit more and be like, you know, that's a little odd. I'm going to take that as a sign that this spell is potentially going to be influenced by that, or the outcome is going to be something related to what I'm seeing in the candle wax. So I will read into that a little bit, but for the most part, I would say I don't really look too deep into signs unless it's a pattern. That's just kind of a general rule of thumb I have for myself. It doesn't mean it's right. I'm not saying I'm correct. I think other people have very different opinions on this. It's the same thing with deities. I don't really look at, if something odd presents itself once, that's an odd coincidence. If something presents itself twice and it's odd, then I'm gonna start paying attention. And 3 times, yes, something is definitely reaching out to me. I need to check into these signs and figure out what's going on. But if it's just a one-off event, I don't really pay too much mind. I just take a mental note, you know, log it in the back of my brain to keep a lookout for anything else. And signs are so personal too. Like what's a sign for me is not going to be a sign for you, and vice versa. Signs speak to our subconscious minds, and everyone's subconscious mind is a little bit different. So I can't really give advice as to what one specific thing means, because again, it's going to mean different to different people. I have been stuck on perfume TikTok, and I was thinking that using perfume could be used as protection or maybe glamour magic. Do you have any suggestions on how to use perfume or something similar, like of course oils? I have a ton of social anxiety, and I'm thinking about the notes in my perfume so that I can use it as protection or a confidence booster. So I have a video titled Magical Oils, and in that video I talk about all the different ways that you can use these magical oils, which I feel like the exact same knowledge applies for perfume. So I'll link that video below in the description box. But beyond that, I really use perfumes as more of a way to entice certain entities or spirits into my space. So like if I'm working with an Egyptian deity, I will put on some Egyptian perfume, you know, that kind of thing. So I definitely recommend watching that magical oils video because I'm going to have a lot more advice in that video. But I am doing a video soon. I think I've already mentioned it somewhere in this video where I'm going to be talking about glamours and sex magic with another practitioner. So that should hopefully be coming out in another week or so. I think we're going to be doing it pretty soon. So yeah, check out my magical oils video and then also keep an eye out for that collaboration that I'm about to do for glamour magic. Also, so sorry that you struggle with social anxiety. Me too. I get it. I feel you. What are the kinds of spells, deities, or advice you generally tell people to avoid? So there isn't really too much that I tell people to avoid because I feel like there's already so much fear mongering in the occult community in general. I really try to come from a place of understanding something rather than fearing something. So there isn't really anything that I would say to avoid. I mean, just do your research and make sure you're really knowledgeable in what it is that you're doing. I would say maybe blood magic is the only one that comes to mind right off the bat. If I had to pick something, I would not recommend that to beginners just because, first of all, you have to learn the safety of it, the safety aspect of being able to extract that blood, but also your blood, your life force is such a powerful, potent thing. If you haven't figured out how to even do spell work, how to really figure out what your intention phrase is going to be and how to be really like efficient and precise, adding in blood magic into your rituals when you don't already know fully what it is that you're doing yet adds an additional level of power that you're maybe just not ready for. So I think that's the only thing that I would say for beginners to maybe avoid doing blood magic and things like that and just getting a feel for how to be effective in your magical practice first. But as far as overall, I don't really think there's anything that I would tell people to avoid. I think that it's going to differ for every single person. There are certain things that I don't like to do that other people are great at and they have great experiences doing. So I think it's just a trial and error thing and people have to figure out where the boundaries are for themselves. What is the biggest thing you wish that you knew at the beginning of your practice, towards the middle of your practice, and maybe something you wish as of recently for your practice? So things that I wish I knew in the beginning of my practice, I did already kind of cover this. So I made a video for advice for beginner occultists, and everything in that video is what I would recommend to a beginner. That video is what I wish I had when I was just starting my occult practice. So I'm going to refer to that video as part of my answer to this question. But as far as when it gets to the point where you're in the middle of your practice and you feel a little bit more intermediate and you're not a beginner anymore, I wish that I knew that it's really difficult to find content for intermediate or advanced practitioners. You almost just kind of have to pick a specialty and deep dive into it and really specialize in something. When I was a beginner witch, for example, and then once I got past the point of being a beginner and I would consider myself more of like an intermediate witchcraft practitioner, I was like, where are all the intermediate witchcraft books? I don't understand. And I think that we're so used to going to school. You know, most of us spend 12 years in school and then beyond that, we potentially go off to college, etc. And there's this curriculum set out for you. You learn the basics and then you learn the intermediate content and then you get into advanced or honors classes and you learn even more. And I think we get so used to this step-by-step thing that when you go into the world of the occult, we have to remind ourselves that this is hidden knowledge and you really have to work for it. You have to search for it because it's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter. So when I was transitioning from being a beginner witch into more of an intermediate witch, that was the biggest hurdle for me to cross because I was like, well, what the heck? Where are all the intermediate books? Where do I go from here and what do I do? And what I have found is that there really isn't a lot of intermediate books and you really just have to kind of pick something that interests you and deep dive into it. Whether it's a more shamanic style of practicing and you want to deep dive into the astral realm, or whether you want to start working with tree spirits or getting into herbalism or palmistry or tarot reading or astrology, whatever it is, pick a specialty and deep dive into it and see where that takes you. So I think that's the advice that I would give to intermediate practitioners. And as far as something that I wish as of recently for my practice, I would say learn how to balance your life, because I have a tendency to be a very obsessive person and I am so obsessed and enthralled in everything with the occult community. I love magic and mysticism and all of that to the point where I get a little bit obsessed. I end up doing it too much and then other areas of my life end up being sacrificed. So recently I've really had to learn balance because my schooling, for example, ended up taking a backseat, and that's something that I should be focusing on. But instead of focusing on my schooling, I was too deep into an occult study that I was really drawn into and too obsessed with it. So I think balance for me is something that I'm currently working on, and some advice that I would like to give. It'll always be there for you, okay? You don't have to like dive into the deep end and stay there. So yeah, just trying to find balance with the mundane aspects of my life. I get lost easily in magic and mysticism, and I want to stay here forever, and it's hard for me to balance the mundane parts of my life. How do you feel, or how do you approach when someone enters a branch of the craft and just wants a quick fix for a problem or an issue? I've been an avid practitioner for over 20 years. At this point, when someone comes to me to just ask for a spell or just how to completely do something, it's frustrating. I love learning and sharing knowledge, but sometimes I can't hide my frustration if someone is just getting into something without bothering to learn and understand it, just to basically have the universe do them a solid over and over again. Have you come across this, and how do you handle this? Yes, I have come across this a lot. People coming into the world of witchcraft wanting a quick fix. I don't handle it well. I wish I could say that I am this super chill person that's like super understanding and whatnot. I try my best to be understanding, but for me it is extremely frustrating. I find it is very frustrating when people are coming into witchcraft or other occult traditions wanting a quick fix. They either want a love spell or a hex. You know, those are the two. I want to learn how to do a love spell so I can force this person to love me, or I want to hex this person because they were evil and mean to me and they deserve it, and whatever. And it is so frustrating. So I feel you. I resonate with you. I wish I had better advice, honestly, but same here. It is very, very frustrating. And then I have to reiterate the same thing over and over to people, that it's not like it is in the movies. You can't just do this kind of work and get exactly what you want out of it without any sort of expertise or knowledge or anything. And this is a spirituality for a lot of people. This is a way of life. It's not just sitting down to do spell work. There's this whole spirituality that is behind it all, and it really waters it down and makes it sound kind of silly and stupid when people are just wanting to come in for a quick fix and wanting just a spell for whatever, not even caring about the lifestyle or the spirituality aspect or whatever. So it is a little insulting, but also at the same time, it's not their fault. You know, like TV shows and movies have really portrayed witchcraft and magic to be a certain way. So I don't necessarily blame those people either, because I get it. I get why they would think that you can just come in and cast a love spell and call it a day, but it is frustrating to deal with, and it's hard to have those conversations with people over and over again, explaining to them what magic actually is and that they can't just come in and take what they want and leave. So yeah, I resonate with what you said. I guess that's what I can say for that. And this concludes part 1 of my 20K Q&A. I was going to put this all into one video and just have one super long video answering all the questions, but I have to be transparent with you. This video has been taking me a really long time to film and to edit, so I am just going to wrap this up as part 1, and then in a couple days you can expect to see part 2. Once part 2 is up, I will link it down below in the description box of this video, so if you're watching this video in the future, you can just go straight to part 2 because it'll probably be out by then. But in the next video, we are going to talk about so much stuff. We've got the random category coming up, we've got conspiracies, we've got more spell work and magic and spirituality and controversial topics and mental health and all of those things, so definitely stay tuned for that. I will see you in the next one.